Well, first of all, thank you all for the invitation to come up and talk to your group. If those of you behind the back cannot hear me, let me know. My voice carries. When you grew up in an Italian family, you learn to project if you want to be heard. So if you can hear me, great. If you can't, let me know and we can go to the microphone. But I'm pretty loud with projection. So what is the difference between astrophotography and sky photography? Well, most people will argue there's no difference at all, but sky photography can include things that are not astronomical. Fireworks, satellites, meteors, they're not astronomical really, they're atmospheric phenomena. Clouds, lightning, you can imagine all kinds of things, rocket launches. Night sky photography is a much more general form of photography. Now, I do some astrophotography, which I consider to be just zooming in on very, very close-up things, and I'm going to show you a few of those later. But my program tonight, and I would appreciate it if you have questions, and I hope you do, please hold them until the very end, because otherwise, with the ADD riddled in my brain, you'd say we're going to go off on some wild ride, and we don't want to do that. I want to stick to the script here if I possibly can. So tonight, what I would like to do is talk to you a little bit about, well, my past 60 years of photographing the night sky. Actually, it's a little bit more than 60, but that's close. And I know what you're all wondering right now, just how the hell old is this guy? I started very young. I was a fetus when I started. Very, very young. I started very young, but that's okay. I'm not that old yet. What's important for me to share with you, though, is that I'm not going to share with you technical details. What's more important to me is the stories behind the photos. Technical details are great, but that's not what this program is about. When I was a kid, I used to spend a great deal of time outdoors at night with my telescope. And if it was dark and if it was clear, everybody in the neighborhood knew where I'd be. I was out in the backyard, I had my telescope aimed toward the sky, watching things. And I remember one night, it must have been summer, because the windows in my house were open, and I could hear my mom and dad talking on the inside. And I heard my father say to my mother, "What the hell does that kid do out there all night?" He had no clue. And I'm waiting for my mother's response. Silence. She had no clue either. And at that moment, I realized I'm a weirdo. I'm out here spending my night under the stars, doing things, and nobody knows what I'm doing. And it occurred to me that there's got to be a way to communicate what I am doing so people could understand. Now, I'm just a kid, but I had this intuition that since I was kind of a visual learner, I didn't realize it at the time, but intuitively, I guess I did. I got to thinking, maybe if I start taking photographs of things that I'm looking at, maybe people will get an idea of what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how excited I am about all this. And that was the start of it all. And that was the beginning of the journey, which up to this point has been 60 years. This is the story of that journey that began on that night. And because I owe it to my mother and father for getting me started on that journey, even though they didn't know what I was doing, they started me off, I am going to dedicate this presentation to my mom and dad. Oh, that's great. Okay, because they got me started on it and encouraged me the entire way, even though they had no clue most of the time. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start back in the early years. Now, like I said, this is a long time ago. You think 60 years. We're talking about the mid-1960s when I got started in doing all this. I tried to save some money, shoveling snow, cutting grass, doing all sorts of things. When you grow up in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of snow, there's a lot of grass. And I tried to save some money up because I wanted to buy a camera and a tripod. And I did. This is my first camera. And by the way, I still have it. I'm thinking of trying to get some 120 film somewhere and maybe get it to work again. I would love to compare it with what we have today. But what I did was I set this camera up outside in my backyard at night, aimed it up to the north, aimed it up over my neighbor's house. And well, you can see my neighbor's house is here, but this is our antenna. You remember those old antennas? Us old timers, we remember. The young people, they have no idea what we're talking about. But anyway, I aimed it up toward the north. I aimed it up toward the North Star right there. And I let it go for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, half an hour. I don't recall because I didn't write things down back then. And I did a star trail photo with Tri-X, that very super high speed black and white film. Oh man, yeah, it was ISO 400. Wow, that was crazy. Actually, it was ASA 400. But it worked, and I got a photograph, and oh my gosh, I was so excited. A few years later, I think it was for a birthday gift. I can't be sure. But I got another camera. I had been harping about wanting a 35 millimeter camera for ages. Oh my God, I wanted one. And somehow or other, I think it was a birthday gift, it showed up, and it was an EXA 2A camera. And I had more fun with that camera, I think, than it should be allowed by law. It was amazing, the things I could do with it, and I could actually start to use color film at that point. I used to go out and take photographs, and this is a shot in the opposite direction to the south. Wallops Island, Virginia would launch rockets from time to time, and they would release barium and lithium clouds and various things in the atmosphere to measure atmospheric currents and also magnetic fields. And we read about this was going to happen one night, so I went out and I captured this with that camera, one of my first photos with that camera, but I took all kinds of pictures with it. And one of my most exciting memories was the night of April 12th, 1968. I was a junior in high school because there was a total lunar eclipse that night. And somehow, I don't know how, but somehow my father finagled the local newspaper photographer to allow me to accompany him on the roof of the newspaper building with my telescope to take photographs of this eclipse. And so the newspaper covered this, like I was a big celebrity, right? And so I appeared in the newspaper the day before. Look at that geek over there. I appeared in the newspaper the day before with my telescope, with my camera, this same camera. And then the night after the eclipse, my eclipse photos appeared in the newspaper. The photographer didn't understand how to photograph the eclipse at all. And I had to explain to him why everything wasn't coming out right. Well, he didn't understand, or he understood and he just wanted to make me feel good. I don't know. But as it turned out, after he processed all the film in the darkroom, his photos did not turn out at all. Mine came out. They're not great. Believe me, these are not great. But hey, for a 16-year-old kid, I was pretty excited back then. Today, a 16-year-old kid would never accept something like this. But back then, this was pretty highfalutin stuff. This was 1968 in April. So I had a lot of fun with that camera. And then I got my first digital camera. Oh, it was a long time later. It was a Canon G2. What are they up to now? Like G47 or something? I don't know what they're up to. But this was my first digital camera, and around 2002 I got this. This was a real game changer. Those of you that remember your first digital, this was a game changer. Because now I didn't have to be very picky about the photos I was taking. I could just take shots and analyze them later for the best ones. Well, this is both a good thing and a bad thing. I was able to take a lot of photos. I managed to take this camera with me to Australia. I got some very nice photos with the G2. I didn't know very much about shooting in RAW format at the time. I didn't understand what RAW was, but I knew that it was a good thing. And I knew that I had to learn it. So I shot everything with RAW, and I'm so glad I did, because I can go back to those images today and process them with the new software and new technology we have, and they're so much better than they ever were back then. But I took it with me on a cruise. I took it with me on land to Australia, did some photos, and I realized this is both good and bad. On the cruise that I took, I lecture on cruise ships. I've been doing that for 40 years also. I took it on the cruise, and it was an Alaska cruise, and I shot, maybe 10 days, 4,000 images. And I realized when I came home, and this was back around 2002, 2003, something like that, which, by the way, I have still not looked at those images. I have no idea. There's so many in there. I realized this is not photography anymore. All I'm doing is harvesting images. And this is not the way I want to do things. So I put the digital camera away. And I bought myself a 5x7 with a big hefty camera, tripod, big hefty tripod, a lens, just a crazy expensive lens, and I used it. I figured I need something to slow me down, and folks, nothing will slow you down besides medium and large format. That will slow you down. So I went from film to digital, back to film, just to slow myself down and to get my head back in the game. And I did that for a couple of years, and didn't take many photos because I couldn't, but that's okay. When the new digital cameras came out, DSLRs, I was ready, and I knew how I was going to do photography at that point. And I've been doing that ever since. Well, that's the beginning. And then around 2007, I got a call from a sky photographer in Iran who was setting up an organization that he was calling The World at Night. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but it's certainly something you should be. The World at Night, he was setting this up, and the idea was to have expert night sky photographers from around the world in this organization that would photograph the night sky from a variety of places. The whole purpose was to show that there is one sky for everyone. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's the same sky. And that was in 2007, and today there are about 36 members. This is not something you join and pay your dues. This was an invited group. I was one of the very first people to be asked to join. I was honored. And so we now have about 36 members all over the world, some of the very best night sky photographers anywhere on the planet. And I'm very proud to be one of only, I think, 6 or 7 Americans in this entire group. We try to stay active. We've done books, we've done exhibits, we've all over the world. We've done lectures and all kinds of presentations. But I had been involved in travel anyway. As I said, I had been lecturing on cruise ships for, well, today it's about 40 years ago. It started in the mid-'80s. So I had been traveling all over the world anyway, taking photographs of the night sky. And I figured this is perfect. Since that time, I've been fortunate to have traveled to a good piece of the world and photographed the night sky in a whole variety of places. The red, obviously, is places that I've been to. And tonight, what I'd like to do is share some of those images and some of those stories from around the world with you. Because, as I say, it's not the technical aspects of things that's important to me, it's the stories behind them. And boy, do I have stories. So, hope you're ready for these. Let's start off with some of my favorites. those once-in-a-lifetime shots, and you all know what they're like. Those shots that you only get one shot at, and if you screw it up, that's it. Some of you probably remember back in the late 1990s, there was a comet in the sky known as Comet Hale-Bopp. And I'm sure many of you were out looking at it, perhaps photographing it. It was a a comet just stayed there in the sky for almost a year, and it just kept getting brighter and brighter and bigger and bigger. This photograph I did with medium format, and I was on Mount Laguna with a telescope, guiding, tracking, compensating for the rotation of the Earth. The comet appeared in the southwest, right over top of San Diego's Lindbergh Field. And I was photographing this thing. I'm not sure what the exposure on this was, but it was probably close to 20 or 30 minutes long. It was a long exposure, and I'm tracking very carefully, visually, by watching crosshairs on the head of the comet, because as the Earth is turning, and the comet has its own motion, I have to try to keep the telescope and camera aimed in the right direction. And these airplanes kept coming and ruining my shot. And I am just cursing up a storm. Oh, this was the most irritating thing. Good Lord, how does anybody do this? This is making me nuts. But I learned something that night. And since I've learned, don't let it get you down. There are a lot of things that are going to go wrong to screw up your photos. And I'll tell you what, if I had that same photo without the airplane trails, without the looping airplane trails all over the place, it would be boring. It'd be just another photograph of a comet. As it is, it's unique. And when I saw this, I thought, you know what, this is pretty cool. My message is, don't get upset when things go wrong. I have discovered over the years, every time I'm out with a camera photographing the night sky, every time, something goes wrong. And it doesn't bother me anymore. Since that night, nothing bothers me. And the reason it doesn't bother me is because over the years, I have discovered 50, 60, maybe even 70% of those images that were ruined by something turned out to be the best of the entire night. The airplanes did for me something I couldn't do. People walk in front of your camera with a flashlight, cars go by. Somebody walks by your tripod and shakes the tripod. All of these things you get upset about, right? Wait until you see the images, because you may discover what I've discovered. Maybe between 50 and 70% of all the images that were messed up turned out to be the ones that were the winners for me. They really did it. And I've seen this time and time and time and time again over the years. So if you want a message from me tonight, that's it. Don't get upset. Just take another picture. Check it out. Later on, you'll see what I'm talking about. And some of you probably already have. Well, comets, you know, they come and they go. And there's a once-in-a-lifetime thing a lot of times. Well, Halley's Comet back in 1986 was one I managed to get back in the Pinacate Mountains in Mexico, over here next to some saguaros. And then there was the great Comet Hyakutake, also up on Mount Laguna. I was able to shoot this. If I had to make a choice between Comet Hyakutake and Comet Hale-Bopp, they appeared within a few months of each other. I would choose Hyakutake in a moment. Hale-Bopp lasted for months. It just kept, it was big, it was bright. Hyakutake lasted a few days, and that was it. Not many people saw it because it got to its closest and brightest during the middle of the work week, and people didn't want to go out where it was dark to see it, and they missed probably the greatest comet I've ever seen. This comet got so close to the Earth, only about 90 million miles away, it was very, very close, that you could actually see it moving among the stars. It was changing its position In real time, you can actually see it. And the photos, this is just one photo, the tail of that comet. I saw the tail go 70 degrees across the sky. That's like from here to back there. Folks in Arizona said it went 100 degrees. They saw it 100 degrees across the sky. It was immense. And if ever I wanted another crack at a once-in-a-lifetime event with the modern digital cameras that we have today, it's that one. Oh, I want another shot at that comet, but it's not going to happen. Well, another once-in-a-lifetime thing doesn't seem like a terribly big deal, but it turned out it was after the fact. Again, you don't know what's going on sometimes in real time. I was also up on Mount Laguna for this one, and you see a streak going across the sky, and that is the space shuttle Endeavour back in September of '97. And so as the space shuttle goes across reflecting sunlight, you see a streak going through the stars. And okay, it's a shot. And the reason I wanted to photograph this thing was because on board was Jim Newman, who was an astronaut from San Diego. And I wanted to capture him going across the sky over San Diego County. And at the end, after I processed this, I printed him up and I gave him a photo. He immediately asked for more copies so that he'd give it to his crew members, and they loved it. But he was absolutely thrilled. Now, I look at this photo and I think, it's mediocre at best. It's not great. He was insane about this photo. He loved it. And let me tell you why. I didn't realize this at the time, but when I gave it to him, he gave me the mission patch. And this is the mission patch for the STS-69. And on the mission patch, you notice a bright star and a constellation right here. That bright star is the star Sirius, and the constellation is Canis Major, the great dog. That is Sirius, and this is Canis Major right here. And his shuttle went right through the center of that. And why was he so thrilled? Because not only was Canis Major and Sirius on the mission patch, they called themselves the Dog Crew. Today I tell people this was all planned. It was a happy accident, and it's okay. But I was thrilled to find out. This is what I'm saying about things happen after the fact. Let it happen. And I'm not terribly impressed with the photo, but he was, because of the meaning, the story behind it. Okay, once in a lifetime, this really was it. I was involved, I took a group to Easter Island back in 2007. Coincidentally, when Comet McNaught was at its brightest. This was a bright comet, especially in the southern hemisphere. I got to photograph it against some of the moye in Easter Island, and also the light pollution. You wouldn't think they have light pollution there, but they got plenty. The problem with this image and the problem with that whole trip was I was deathly ill, and I mean deathly ill. Everybody on that trip got sick for something. We don't know what it was, but we all got sick. But this is a once in a lifetime deal. So we all heading out to this area to photograph the comet. I'm going to ask you not to look too closely because it's horribly out of focus. Well, I was out of focus that night. I was click and then bleh, click and bleh again, and we were all doing the same thing. So once in a lifetime, you take what you get, and okay, it's not the greatest photo in the world, but there's a story behind it. And once you have the story, that's really what matters to me. Well, those are once in a lifetime events. Well, some people might say that eclipses are a once in a lifetime event for them. I love eclipses of all kinds, lunar eclipses, solar eclipses. This is a sequence I shot from Borrego Springs in August of 2007 using a small refractor telescope and putting that sequence together in Photoshop. It's not the sort of thing you can photograph easily in real time like that, but you piece it together and it shows the sequence of the eclipse itself. Lunar eclipses are among my favorites to shoot, but I have to tell you, I love solar eclipses, especially total solar eclipses. This one coming up in August, I'll be in Iceland. It'll be my 20th total solar eclipse, and I'm looking forward to it. This was the one that was in the US in 2017, and we were in Idaho for this one. It was, that was my 18th total solar eclipse, and I think it was my 18th, maybe it was, I don't remember. It was, to this date, the best of all eclipses that I have ever experienced. It was just absolutely magnificent. We were in Idaho, we were in a high elevation, clear sky, dark blue sky, dry weather. We had a 100-acre farm all to ourselves, and it was just magnificent. Then there were those that were not in the US, and these can be considered, for many people, once in a lifetime. The eclipses in 2001 and 2008, one of them in Zambia and the other in Siberia. The Zambia eclipse was fun because we got hung up at the airport in Victoria in Zimbabwe, and the plane had broken down. We had a charter plane. The plane had broken down. They needed to get a part, and they had a part coming from South Africa. They had a part coming from two other places. I can't remember where. But we're in Africa. I mean, is it going to get here? Are we going to leave? And I'm looking at my clock, and the ticking, and it's ticking, it's ticking, and the moon is moving, and we're going to miss this thing. We're going to miss it. Well, bottom line is we didn't miss it. We got on the plane. We raced to the plane. We got on the plane. We landed at the landing strip. We got off the plane. We got in the buses. I am assembling my camera gear and tripod on the bus because when we get off, it's going to be like minutes before the eclipse begins. And I'm ready to go. And I told people, do not get in front of me. I will run you down. And they didn't. They knew me. Okay. So the bus stops, I'm the first one off, and I'm running to find a place with some kind of a foreground to put in this picture. And I hear footsteps behind me running just as fast as I am. And I hear shh, 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 shh. I turn around and I look, and our bus driver is running after me, spraying me, because this is a tick-infested field that I'm running into. And he's spraying my feet and he's spraying everything. I didn't care. Ticks be damned. I'm gonna get this shot. And I set it up, and I was only able to get part of the eclipse after all of that. These are the kinds of things that happen, and you got to be ready for them. There are places in the world where I've been that never did get the shot. That's okay. That's okay. That's part of the story. Sometimes you don't get it. One of the best ones was in China. We were in 2009, we were on a river cruise, and we were scheduled to be, for the eclipse day, we were scheduled to dock at Wuhan. You remember Wuhan, don't you? Remember our house arrest a few years ago? It started in Wuhan. Well, we were supposed to be in Wuhan, but it was raining in Wuhan, and during the night, our tour leader changed all the plans, and we woke up in the morning. Where's Wuhan? We're not in Wuhan. We're in Yicheng. It's okay. The eclipse is going right over us. So I had no idea where I was going. I just got in. I got off the ship, and I started walking through town, and it was hot. July. If you've never been to China in the summer, don't. It is hell on earth. Absolutely hell on earth. It was so hot and humid. My God, was it humid. And I'm walking, I'm looking for something, anything to put in my pictures, and I found this pagoda about a mile away from the ship, and I had hoofed it pretty fast. I opened up my camera bag, and everything was covered with dew. It was covered with moisture. It was that humid. From the cold air in the ship to the heat and the humidity, everything was covered. Well, I got it all set up. I managed to get a shot like this. I had a lot of Chinese folks standing around me looking at me while I was taking it. They had no idea what I was doing. But during this particular eclipse, I wanted to do something different. everybody's photographing the eclipse in that direction. I wanted to photograph in the opposite direction because what causes an eclipse, the moon passes in front of the sun, but that process casts the shadow of the moon onto the earth and into the atmosphere of the earth. And so I photographed the opposite direction across the Yangtze River, and I was able to do a panoramic scene, and you can see the dark circular, that is the shadow of the moon as it's moving toward us. Sometimes you just have to be ready to move quickly and grab what you can get. And I wanted to get that shot, and it turned out really well because that's a panoramic shot. It's like 7 or 8 photos. But you have to remember, I have a bunch of Chinese folks standing behind me watching every move I make. They had no idea what I was doing. So now let's leave the Chinese folks behind and let's talk about the Japanese folks, because in Australia I had an encounter with an entire shipload of Japanese tourists. Shipload, ship with a P, shipload, okay? On Green Island in 2012, we get off our ship and we hoof it out to the end of this island with this great big log going across. And I thought, this is perfect. I got the water, I got the sky, and then our people came and tried to sit down in front of me, which I didn't want anyone in my picture. They sat down in front of me, that's okay. I saw it and I thought, this is gonna work. But then a ship of Japanese tourists docked, and there must have been hundreds of them. And they came in our direction, and they saw me with my camera. And I know what they were thinking. This must be the best place in the universe to photograph the eclipse. This is where we want to be. Well, they didn't want to be where I was. They wanted to be in front of me. Now you see there's not much room in front of me, okay? But they all wanted to be in front of me. And you notice they're not there. I fought them all off. They were all behind me. I would not let them by. They were not happy with me. But I think they figured out that I was serious about this. But I got the shot, and again, you can see the shadow of the moon, that dark, it's projecting more obliquely now against the atmosphere as that shadow is coming across us. Well, that was quite an experience, and I'm going to come back to this image a little bit later in a slightly different form, and you'll see what I was dealing with. Well, the other thing that is, to me, the most exciting thing to photograph is the northern lights, the aurora borealis. I don't suppose there's anyone in here who has been to one of these places, Alaska, Iceland, Norway, with me at all. I don't think so. Oh, of course, you were there. Of course, you went to Alaska. Right. Well, this year we went, and I got to tell you, I've been to Alaska now. Well, this is my 27th year going back to photograph the lights up in Fairbanks in the winter, of course. I don't know, was it cold when you were there? It was cold. Well, last year was cold. It's always cold, okay? It's winter in Fairbanks, Alaska. This year was the coldest recorded winter in Fairbanks history, and we were there for it. It never got above zero the entire week that we were there. And I don't mind minus 30, minus 40 degrees at night. That's fine. I can deal with it. As long as it warms up in the daytime a little bit. It never did. Oh, it was brutal. But the northern lights are amazing. If you've ever photographed them, they are big. They cover the sky. They're magnificent. They move. They can have colors. They can move quickly. They can dance. Some people say they make sound. I've not heard it, but some people claim that they can actually hear some sound, not from the lights, but from something in the near vicinity when the lights are there. But you get a sense from this very wide-angle photograph just how immense these things are, and they're moving, dancing very slowly across the sky. This is, again, a panoramic shot going across. We took a ride down from Fairbanks to Denali. A friend of mine And a couple friends of mine and I went to Denali. We drove down there from Fairbanks. It's about a 4-hour drive. And we wanted to be there for sunset. And we were. We got there before sunset. I got my telescope, my camera set up with a tripod, my panoramic jig. I got it up because I wanted to do panoramic scene of the sunset. And it was terrible sunset, absolutely terrible. It's one of those, you know, with perfectly clear sky, there's no color, it was just bleh, you know, one of those kinds of sunsets. But I was set up, thankfully. As I'm watching the sun go down in the west, I'm looking around the sky, looking for clouds, and there are clouds everywhere. And I'm looking, and these are cirrus clouds, and I'm looking, and I look back down, and a couple of minutes I look up, and they're in different places. And I watch them, and they're moving. The clouds are moving like this. I never saw anything like it. They weren't clouds. It was the northern lights. Before the sunset, the sky was bright. That night, the northern lights started before sunset, did not take a break the entire night, just kept going and going and going. At dawn the next morning, sun was coming up, they were still going. This was a panoramic shot that I was able to get that night. Since I was set up, I was able to get this. It looks kind of overexposed on this image. And I don't think you can see it in this photo. I don't think you could see it. I have a print of this in my office, a very big one, where you could see it. There's actually a comet, I forget what comet that was now, back then. Begins with a letter Y. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, you could actually see that in the photograph. Did not expect a night like this. This was quite amazing. And then there are nights like this where, this was in Iceland. Both of these were in Iceland on the same night. We had a group. We went to dinner. I, of course, checked all the solar magnetic information online. I make sure what kind of conditions we're going to have. I'm somewhat able to predict whether or not we're going to get the auroras. But the one thing about the aurora is you really can't predict it very well. The conditions, all the conditions for that night were flatlined. There was nothing happening. And I told people, let's just go and have a good dinner and enjoy ourselves. Forget about the aurora because just nothing's going to happen. We barely got off of the bus and into the restaurant and the sky exploded. And we had to stop and photograph it because people were running in and out of the restaurant taking pictures during the entire night. And this was a night where nothing was supposed to happen. Absolutely nothing. I've also been in those situations where the conditions were, man, this is going to be an amazing night of auroral displays. Absolutely amazing. And bupkis, nothing. You just don't know. You just can't know. And I tell people there's only one way to know is to be out there. You have to be out there. Sometimes the aurora comes out of nowhere and you just never know. I really love shooting it from Norway on a ship. It's very difficult to do because the ship is moving, the water is moving, and the aurora is moving, and you have to try to photograph it well. You got to be in the right position. You got to wait for the ship to rock in just the right direction before you can snap the shutter. I mean, it's a whole mess of things you got to consider, and these are things that, of course, I lecture about for folks photographing the aurora from a ship. But it produces such a beautiful image, especially with the moon up there. One night during a Norway cruise, wasn't this cruise, it was one earlier, the aurora erupted and it was dancing all over the place and it was magnificent. And then it settled down, as it does, and it goes into what we call a recovery phase. After the substorm, it goes into that recovery phase. And that's when people say, okay, it's cold, I'm going to go in and get a hot chocolate. I don't. I never do. Because that is the best time to photograph the aurora, as far as I'm concerned. You can take longer exposures. The textures of the aurora are so much more subtle. And And I stayed out there, and there was one other person on the deck of the ship. She did not know I was there, but I got this shot of her silhouetted against the moonlight on the water, just absolutely mesmerized by what she was looking at. She never knew I was there, and I got the shot. And it's one of those things that, you know, I had not expected to get a shot like this. But this is one of my favorite photos because it captures so much. It really tells a story. She just was completely captivated by everything. And this tells the story of the Northern Lights better than anything else. You can just try to describe them in words. Nothing describes them like a photograph. And this really, she was completely enthralled by what was going on up there. And this wasn't even the best part of the show. This is after. This is the recovery phase. There have been occasions where I've been able to do things that were unique and before anyone else was able to do them. And so let's talk about some of these firsts that I was able to pull off. I had not intended to do this by any means, but after I did it, I realized, hey, I don't think anybody's ever done this before. The first time this happened, and I don't think anybody had done something like this before this. Perhaps they have, but I have never seen it, so it doesn't matter to being first, doesn't really matter to me. I just want to share these images. Back in 1998, the Near-Earth Asteroid Rendezvous mission, called NEAR, was sent on a mission to an asteroid, 433 Eros. And the idea was that this was going to orbit this asteroid and eventually land on the asteroid, so we can get our first close-up photos of the asteroid. Well, the spacecraft, NEAR, had to make a flyby around Venus, I believe it was, a couple of flybys to pick up some speed, but then it was had to go to the asteroid and in the other direction. It was going to fly past the Earth on a particular night, and I was out waiting for it. And sure enough, you can see the light glint off of the satellite as it was passing the Earth. I was able to get a few-second photograph of it. I don't know that anyone else had done this up to that point today. Of course, people do this all the time, but I don't know whether anyone else had done it. Perhaps they had. But this was pretty cool. I set out to do something, I did it, and if it was the first, great. If it wasn't, that's okay too. In Alaska, I'm standing out waiting for the lights, and a buddy of mine was up ahead of me in a car, and he was sitting in the car warming up, and I was outside just looking at the sky, and there was some weird thing up in the sky, this odd light up there, and I had never seen anything like it. And I photographed that. I went up and knocked on his window, and I said, hey, Roger, come on out here. Tell me what the heck this thing is. And he looked at it, had no idea what it was, but we photographed like crazy. This is a close-up of it up here. And you can see it's a satellite moving across in this big cloud. I had to contact some space scientists. They did some calculations and checked, and this was a Delta IV rocket that had been launched, was doing a fuel dump at the time, was dumping fuel up in the very far upper atmosphere, and it was glowing by sunlight, and that's what we saw. I never saw anything like this before. In fact, the space scientists I talked to, it took them a while to figure out what this was, but we figured out what it was and which rocket it was. It's the sort of thing that happens. And today, of course, you can see fuel dumps all the time. Well, of course, we got 20,000 satellites up there and all kinds of rocket boosters, and there are all kinds of fuel dumps going on. You're going to be seeing this stuff much more often. But 30 years ago or 20 years ago, it wasn't that common. So I'm guessing this was one of the very first that was done. And then, remember that photograph from Australia with all the Japanese tourists behind me? When I was on the airplane flying to Australia for this eclipse, I remember I was reading Outdoor Photographer magazine. It was my favorite. Oh my gosh, I love that magazine. And I was reading it, and there was this article about little planets. Anybody know what those are? They're called little planets. Where you take a photograph, is that what it's called? Something, I think it's something like that. Where you take a panoramic scene from down here up past the zenith, very wide angle, and you take a 360-degree sequence of them like this. And instead of stitching them together like a normal panorama, what you do is you stitch them this way in a circle, so that the horizon goes around in a circle, and you wind up with something called, I think they call them little planets, I don't recall. So I'm on this plane and I'm thinking, you know, I've been to so many solar eclipses. I've got to do something different. I am so tired of doing the same kinds of photos. And I read this article and I thought, nobody's ever done this before. I'm going to give it a try. So I did. I set up the camera and I had plans to do my 360-degree panorama. And this is the result. You can see the landscape that is, you see the people sitting there on that big log right there, okay, and there's the ocean, there's the sun, and okay, and so this is behind me. This is, if I turn the picture around, you see they're all Japanese tourists standing back there hiding in the trees because they didn't want to incur my wrath, okay, but that's I was able to get this shot, and I have, a number of people saw it. This was one of NASA's astronomy photo of the day back in 2012, I think it was. And everybody who saw it said, this is the first time this has ever been done. Nobody's ever done this before. And as I talked to them, I realized why no one has ever done it. You have to be insane, because you spend most of your time looking away from the eclipse. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars and who knows how many hours planning for an eclipse so that you could spend those 2 minutes or 3 minutes just gaping at this amazing celestial phenomenon. And here's this moron standing out there taking pictures. The eclipse is up there and I'm taking pictures in every direction possible except looking at the eclipse. But I got the shot. I think that's what's going to say on my tombstone. Yeah, but he got the shot. Okay, so it took a while to get this, and I got it. It was probably the first time it'd been done for a total solar eclipse. It may have been done since, but I don't know anybody that's as insane as I was back then. That was nuts. One final piece of insanity was in Indonesia for that eclipse, 2016. I had my entire group with me, and I traveled to Indonesia for 2 weeks with nothing but a backpack. Now that's tough to do, first of all, but people in my group were very upset with me because I didn't have my camera gear. No tripod, no big cameras, and they're all saying, well, where are we going to get our great photos from? And I don't know. I just decided not to bring a camera with me, and I didn't. I was going to watch this eclipse and not take pictures. For the first time in history, I was going to do this. But during the eclipse, I pulled out my iPhone. Now, this is back in 2016. It was an iPhone 6. I pulled it out of my pocket, and I went click, 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 click. I stuck it back in my pocket, and that was it. And after the eclipse, of course, we all got back home, and I sent this photo to people, and they were, how did you do that? Where did you take that from? I just decided at the last minute, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. No, I had never seen anybody do a total solar eclipse with an iPhone before. Now, everybody's doing it, of course. But back then, I don't think anybody had done it. Certainly not with an iPhone 6. That was pretty primitive gear. But this turned out to be one of my favorite total solar eclipse shots that I've ever done. Just purely. And I don't know if I'll ever take a camera to an eclipse again. Got my phone. What do I need a camera for? You just do what you have to do. Just get the shot. Sometimes it's an accident. Sometimes you get lucky. I sure got lucky on this one. I certainly got lucky in Australia. I mean, I had a horde of people behind me ready to rush me and push me into the ocean. They were not happy with me, but hey, like I said, He got the shot. That's all that matters. Well, you know, I've traveled a lot of places, and I got to tell you, I've seen some of the darkest skies over the planet, anywhere in the world. I've seen some of the most amazing sights, the northern lights, solar eclipses, the Milky Way from the Atacama Desert in Chile. I don't have words for it. It was fluorescent. You could see its color with the naked eye when you're at 8,000 feet. And there's not a light anywhere for 100 miles. It is dark, pitch black. The most stunning sights I have been fortunate to see. But I have to remind myself, there's no place like home. And when I'm in Borrego, I'm fortunate that I can step outside my front door and have access to a lot of these same things. Not quite as dramatic as the northern lights or total solar eclipses or the Milky Way that casts your shadow on the sand. Not quite that dramatic. But one of the reasons I moved from San Diego to Borrego in the first place 22 years ago was because of the night sky. And I wanted to be able to step outside my front door and have access to the sky very quickly. Early on, I started photographing the Milky Way. This is all from Borrego Springs, from my front yard. That's what's so great about it. I can step outside, look up. Yeah, it's a good night. I'll set up the gear and I'll start taking some shots. You can see that Milky Way. Again, it's a panoramic thing. Then you can see the Milky Way going from one horizon to the other in this projection. But the Milky Way, you're looking pretty much southeast in this direction right here. Just a marvelous night sky. Of course, those of you that have spent some time out there, you know we have these marvelous metal sculptures all over the valley out there, and they are wonderful foregrounds for the night sky. This was one I was out one night photographing this guy, and it was dark, it was quiet, it was peaceful, and I was loving it. Oh, it was fantastic. I was by myself, me and the serpent. We were out there together, and I'm taking pictures, and I get this one shot, I'm playing with it, trying to get the right exposure, and then out of nowhere, this car comes racing up Borrego Springs Road and ruined my shot. I was upset. And then I looked at it on the screen and I thought, maybe this isn't ruined. You know, I realized way back with Halley's Comet, or Hale-Bopp and the airplanes, don't get upset when something ruins your shot. As I realized there are three phases to all of these images. There is, oh, what a piece of crap this is. Oh my gosh, it's ruined, horrible, horrible. The second phase is you get home and you look at it on the large screen, and you look at it and you go, well, maybe I can do something with it. And the third phase is, holy cow, that's good. These are the mistakes. This was a mistake. If that car had not come up that road and had illuminated the side of this sculpture the way it did, and give a little bit of light on the backside as well, if it had not done that, this would have been as boring a shot, and I wouldn't be showing it right now. Pure black, horrible silhouette against the sky, had nothing. That made the difference. That made the photo. It was a mistake. It's one of those that I hadn't planned on it. I let other people do the light painting for me. Out at Fonts Point, it's a wonderful place to go, even on a night where it's a bright moon. And I wanted to go out there one night and take some star trail pictures. The bright moon was illuminating the landscape. And again, ruining my shot were these cars going in and out of the desert, coming up and down the road here. They make the shot, as far as I'm concerned. I was not happy seeing those cars. They're going to ruin the shot. They don't. If they were not there, it would be a boring star trail photo, nothing of any excitement. Those cars going back and forth, to me, are quite interesting. They make the shot for me. And then, also from the front,
do you have time for
I know, I'm watching the clock. And then when we get to the meteor showers, from my backyard, this is great to be able to do this. This is one of the few composites that I've ever done, but you have to do a composite because meteors are a split-second phenomenon. I'm able to capture the Perseid meteor shower back in 2016 very, very nicely. Again, one of those things that is tough to do, but if you think it out in advance and play with it afterwards, you'd be surprised. In the morning, you could stand up on the Crawford overlook in the autumn, and off in the distance here you could see the planet Venus. You could see what's called the zodiacal light. You could see the winter Milky Way. And why does it have a round curve around it? Well, this was a panoramic scene with a very wide-angle lens. And you know what happens when you shoot a panoramic scene up into the sky with a wide-angle lens? You get these chopped corners, like up and down. And I fought over that for a while. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I realized, let's just give it a round. You know, there's no law that says you have to crop things in a square or a rectangle, right? So I gave it a circular, and I like it so much better because it kind of mimics the dome of the sky. The reason is to get away from those jagged edges. That's all I was trying to do. But it produced a marvelous shot. And again, rocket launches happen frequently. In fact, we have one scheduled for tonight. I think around 7:55 are scheduled to go off. These things are very easy to see, even from Borrego. And believe it or not, yes, the Northern Lights. One of the few photographs with a palm tree in front of the Northern Lights. This is from my front yard back in 2024. We get them every few years. Sometimes they're visible to the eye, sometimes they're not. Well, this is the night sky, and these are the things that I photograph in the night sky. But in recent years, I've started looking beyond, doing some astrophotography kind of things, using a device which is called a smart telescope, or I guess I would rather call it a smart camera. It's a device about the size of a shoebox. Weighs only a few pounds. But this is the next big jump in technology. I remember that jump from film to digital. This is the next big jump, and I had to get on this bandwagon. I wanted to try this out. It is marvelous because this is a robotic observatory. It's only the aperture is only 2 inches across, but the images it can take straight out of the instrument without any processing is remarkable. You can photograph something as close as our sun. Of course, this was not in the photograph. I added that, but to give you a sense of scale. But the beautiful sunspots, and you can see some of the granulation in the atmosphere and the limb darkening of the sun and all these things. It's all done with this robotic telescope the size of a shoebox. Everything from our nearest star to some of the farthest stars in our galaxy are available with this small instrument. And I've started playing with this. I don't get out with a camera and tripod as much as I would like to anymore, but that's okay. I'm spending my time under the stars the way I started, with a camera and a telescope, and this is what is able to do it. Again, from places where newborn stars are beginning to form inside of these clouds of gas and dust, to places where there are stellar corpses, places where stars have died and have ejected their atmospheres off into space. These are all photos straight out of this C-STAR instrument. You sit in your living room and you control it from your phone, your smartphone, and you control the telescope and have it do whatever you want to do. This is one of my favorites because it shows a supernova explosion in a galaxy 70 million light years away. And this supernova right there is a tremendously powerful dying star inside of this distant galaxy known as NGC 2146, 70 million light years away. That star exploded 70 million years ago, and this small robotic camera was able to pick it up with just a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of climbing the learning curve. You've got to do that, of course. All of this from the comfort of my backyard, just as it all started 60 years ago.
I'm looking at it online. It's less expensive than our camera.
When
for $600.
you're out there photographing the night sky, it really is quite an amazing thing. It's been a long, amazing journey, not just in Borrego, but all over the world. I've been very fortunate to travel in so many countries, so many places, to see the sky from so many different locations. It has been a tremendously amazing journey, but it's far from over, I guarantee you. I have plans to photograph Halley's Comet when it comes back again in 2061. Now, I will be 109, and I will be happy to see the sun come up. But by God, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to photograph that thing. The journey is far from over. So maybe you'll have me back on the 75th, and I can come back when I'm 95, and or 90 rather, and tell you all about that. But it all goes back to that first night back in my backyard in Pennsylvania when I heard my mom and dad talking. What the hell does that kid do out there all night? And there was silence. My mom had no clue, no answer. Well, back in 2012, she was very near passing away at that point. I took to her a book of a lot of my photographs that she had, many of which she had never seen because they were new. And I showed it to her, and she was lying in the bed and she was looking at these photos, and you could see that pride in her eyes. You know, this is her son taking these pictures, and she's just amazed, flipping, looking. And she looked up at me and she said, "You're really alive when you do this, aren't you?" And I thought, she was yanking my chain all those years. She knew exactly what I was doing. She knew exactly what I was going through. And she finally said it, and she was right. You are completely alive when you're out there in the moment photographing the universe. She instinctively knew. And this is something that sticks with me through the years. There is one final thought that I can pass on to you that encapsulates this entire journey probably better than any. And it comes from Bessie Hyde, who was one of the first explorers in the Grand Canyon back at the turn of the 20th century. She spent a lot of time under the night sky, as you can imagine. And she wrote in her journal, and these are my final words, and these maybe were her final words too, I don't know. But it is so true what she wrote. "We of the night will know many things of which you sleepers have never dreamed." Thank you so much for coming.